Um, so I was just curious, what have you been noticing about people's reaction to the last couple of months when it comes to COVID?
Well, I think really what we're noticing a lot, and not surprisingly, because it is such a universal experience, is just people are struggling, and they're struggling emotionally, and the mental health aspects of this are huge and not insignificant at all. And so we've been seeing kind of this crisis mode that happened in the first few months, is where like there's shut down and what is this, and schools are closed and that piece. And now there's kind of this movement into the long-term portion of this, right? That we're realizing this isn't just going to be a couple weeks, and we can't kind of keep on going in just survival mode of, okay, just kind of, hang by our fingernails and be there, because it's just simply going on too long.
Yeah.
And our bodies and mental health aren't really designed to do that. So that shift is needing to happen.
I've had a lot of conversations with friends of, I feel so much more tired than I usually do, or processing things is harder for me right now. Why is that?
Well, honestly, because what is happening because of COVID, we were not designed for as human beings, right? And when we think about the exhaustion factor, makes a lot of sense. When we think about the fact that we're decreasing the things that help us and we're increasing the things that don't. And by that, we mean our limbic system and our neurological system. That's our kind of fight or flight response, our stress response. They are activated all the time now, right? And we feel that on a day-to-day basis. We feel that when we're sitting there thinking, how am I going to do work? How am I going to do this? We're thinking about that every time we're honestly engaging with a lot of media and what's going to do that. But there's also that point of the things that, we can't really go to the grocery store right now. Everything becomes an exercise in like risk mitigation, right? So we have this increased need for hypervigilance. When we're going to the store, we're not only, hey, do I need, apples and cereal? It is, are people going to stay away from me? Should I touch that? Should I not touch this? Did I touch my phone after I touched this? When I get in line, I am having to be very aware of who and where in my space. And so it's this constant need for hypervigilance that truly does take a toll on our bodies and our brains. It's physiologically and psychologically exhausting, and we're depleting our resources. And when everything becomes this, that's where we see that sort of persistent exhaustion factor that we're all experiencing.
So when you say fight or flight is kind of at this elevated level long term, what does that actually mean chemically for your body, or what's happening within your body?
Okay. So when we think about that, we're seeing things like where our heart rates increase, our blood pressure increases, our muscle tension is higher. And when we take a moment to even reflect, and as I'm talking, we might even be taking a check of your own body and you're realizing, oh, my shoulders are higher and I am breathing a little more shallow. And those things occur very naturally. Now, again, very handy if we're being chased by a lion, not very handy if this is happening every moment of every day. And that's where we're seeing, and not alone, like we're having cortisol and these stress hormones just flood through our bodies on a really regular basis. And that's where we see things like decreased immune functioning and increased pain response and things like that happening. That's why we're seeing like a lot of people with chronic pain actually experience more symptoms and get worse right now, because we're just simply overtaxing our bodies all the time.
Got it. Okay, so when people are saying, gosh, I don't know why I'm so tired, maybe this is one of the reasons.
Yeah, I hear that a lot in my clinical practice. I'm like, this actually makes a lot of sense, right? So we're also not only like, we are stressed all the time, and we're also not able to do the things that help us, those natural protective things that used to be in our daily basis. This is where everything from being able to be out in the world and feel really connected, the light banter we're having with the other people in the stores, the coworker that we can give a hug to or shake a hand or feel connected to, even our masks, which are great and necessary, but they're still a cutoff, right? I don't know the expression of the person sitting next to me. I can't take a moment of pleasure in their smile or their engagement with me. And instead, I'm in this hypervigilant space. So we're increasing our stressors, but we're also decreasing the things that help us.
Is there something also about the fact that now all of our meetings, everything is being done on Zoom? Is there an additional factor with how we're processing emotions?
Yes. So one of the thing about Zoom, again, we're like, it's the blessing and the curse right now, right? It's allowing for this huge amount of connection and productivity. Great. But it's also silly to pretend it's the same thing. And that it doesn't come with its own level of exhaustion. So even right now, when we're talking over video, we feel a need very naturally and accurately to sort of up our game, right? We have to do more to communicate our emotion, to communicate how we're feeling and our thoughts. And we're aware of that, consciously and unconsciously, to be able to sit there and say, okay, what do I need to do? We're also decreasing our feedback loop, right? When we're sitting in a conference meeting, there's a million nonverbals going on that help us figure out, what do we want to say? Do we want to say it? Do they like what I'm saying? Should I jump in here? Should I not? And instead, everyone has to sit here and stare at their screen, waiting for their moment to jump in on the call. Did he like what I said? Did he not what I said? Do they have any idea what I'm saying? Let alone, we're not actually designed to stare at each other's faces this long, right? When we're in a normal meeting, it's normal to watch someone, take a note or look out the window and still be aware that they're paying attention to you, even if they're not staring at your face, which in person would seem super weird. Okay? Because it is. But now all of a sudden, we're sitting there staring at our screen, really having to be hyper attuned and aware that if we look away or we look down, are we making our boss worry? Are we not engaged? Are we checking our phone? Are we doing this and not attuned? And so again, it creates that need for hypervigilance and paying attention to things that we wouldn't normally have to pay attention to. And that's where, again, we see that limbic system ramping up and our need for hyperattention staying at that level. And it feels exhausting, right? We get off that call and you're like, oh, man, I'm just tired.
And then you have, for a lot of people on top of it, you've got kids who are learning at home, going to school from home, people taking care of loved ones. Maybe you're sick yourself, and that's just adding on top of everything.
Exactly. And so that's also part of that hypervigilance, right? You're like, is my kid going to come busting into the room? Is this going to happen? And even if they're not, you're like, oh, and I've stuck them in front of the TV again so I can be in this meeting. And so I'm going to have this low-lying feeling of guilt all the time that I'm disappointing someone or something. Instead of being able to kind of draw those boundaries and say, now's this time and now's this time, and I can be okay with this decision. And that's really one of those other exhausting factors, is just the uncertainty of all of this. And we are not, human beings really hate uncertainty. We are not fans. And the fact that we're uncertain, what's going to happen? Is this the best thing? Is this the best decision to make? We don't get a lot of certainty these days. And that in and of itself is just completely exhausting.
The other thing that we were just talking about within the next team is that we've noticed people tend to be a little bit snappier and fuses are a little bit shorter and people seem to be getting angrier. Is that all possibly connected to this too?
Yes. So there's a number of things I think involved there. One, we're just straight out of resources, right? When we think, where is kind of like what I'll sometimes refer to as our emotional piggy bank? Like, where are we operating from? Am I like, okay, feeling good, got some sleep, feeling okay? Versus, you know what, I'm at like, 5%. Okay, my emotional piggy bank is tapped out. In our emotional piggy banks, there's so much demand right now that they really are tapped out. And that's when we just simply don't have a lot of the resources. And the snarky comment that we might have been like, whatever, at another time feels really personal and bad. And then we also honestly have the grief aspect of it. We are all really experiencing a lot of grief right now, which sometimes gets kind of a lot of looks when I say that. But grief isn't about death. Grief is about loss. And we are all experiencing these tons of losses right now. Loss of connection, loss of certainty, loss of jobs, loss of finances, all of this. And when we think about those, stages of grief that we all know about from just common culture,
Sure.
and denial and anger. And that's where we see a lot of that anger that we're talking about, where we see that, the snarkiness, the irritability, and the out and out anger. is really our ability to, and when we talk about that slow to process part of how do we actually conceptualize this, but it's really easy to go to anger because it's right there at the surface. And so managing it is tough.
Yeah. So now if, people are listening to this and they're going, okay, I'm checking myself a little bit. Like, wait a second.
Yes.
What can you do? I mean, I know that's the $1 million question, right? Everybody is just trying to find a way to alleviate some of this. What is something they could do tonight?
So, okay, there's a number of things that I think are really great and easy to do. So first of all, there's things that, and I say easy, meaning they're simple, not that they're like the magic cure all for existence. I wish they were, right? But a lot of the basics are really important. Like the basic self-care has become like, hey, it might be nice to take a walk, has become, it's really important to take the walk, right? Okay, like this has now become what we need to do. I need to go and walk around the block. And when we're doing that, and when we kind of slip back to that science perspective, we literally are kind of hacking that limbic system and that response. We need different stimulation to help us bring us from that tense heart rate, everything's up, to really getting out and allowing that system to stop. So really, honestly, the best thing we can do, and we're finding that, is just stopping and taking 5 good deep breaths. It sounds simple. I get the biggest eye rolls when I talk to people about that, but I'm like, just give it a shot, okay? There's a reason they built in that weird 2-minute breathing thing on your Apple Watch or your Fitbit. There is science behind it. Because we really are hacking that response and getting ourselves out of that fight or flight response. But doing things, eating, sleeping, those things have become so essential. There's never been a time where it's more apparent of the need for those real basics. The other really big thing to do that we know that has some fascinating science behind it is being able to name our emotion, and name our emotion specifically. Not, I feel bad, gives us no path out, right? You're like, okay, I feel bad. But if we're saying, I'm feeling overwhelmed, okay, now we sit there and have, okay, I need to take some tasks off my plate. I need to call for takeout tonight and not pretend I'm going to make dinner. I'm feeling uncertain about what to do about my kid's school, and that's freaking me out. Okay, great. That gives us an action to take. I'm feeling exhausted. Okay, then we need to work on taking a nap, going to bed earlier, saying, forget it, work's going to have to wait till tomorrow. I'm feeling disconnected. Okay, this is the time when, honey, my partner, I need 15 minutes to go call my friend and talk to them and feel connected to another human. So just the act of naming our emotion, actually really interesting, does a lot biochemically to help us process it, but it also helps us chart a path forward. And so whenever people tell me I feel bad, I'm sure being very annoyed. I'm like, bad isn't an emotion, right? Bad's not a feeling, right? So we need to get to one, not because I'm just being an annoying psychologist, but because it actually helps us figure out, okay. And when we actually step back, you're like, okay, yeah, I am feeling overwhelmed, or I am feeling frustrated. I'm just feeling tense. I feel like I have too much energy, because that's the other piece. We're not physically getting enough movement.
Sure.
We have all fully underestimated what it was like to walk from the office to the conference room, to the car, to the store. And you're like, turns out I've taken 500 steps today.
Sure.
It makes a very big difference in our bodies and our minds.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. Could there be some relief as well in just like understanding there is a reason I'm having this reaction, other people are having this reaction, and just understanding that process?
Yes, exactly. That becomes really powerful. Like when we talk about grief as that construct, everyone's like, why is this important? And I'm like, it's actually important because it gives us a framework to understand what we're going through. And it gives us a point of being compassionate with the other people in our world, and realize our partner's being snarky because they're exhausted and it doesn't actually have anything to do with us. It creates that little bit of space to have some compassion, disconnect, or connect, but to make some deliberate decisions rather than the reactionary part that really can pop up with all of that.
Got it. This is great. Am I missing anything that we should be passing along to people?
I guess just saying it when I was thinking about the Zoom calls, because that becomes important. So some things we can do there that are really good tips are, one, turn off your view of yourself. Okay. One of the problems is that overstimulation and having to attune. And when you're having to look at yourself,
Yeah.
it's worse. So if you turn off your self view, it becomes a lot less stressful.
Yeah.
Also, switching to phone calls. We've become automatic to video calls. And you know what, let's pick up the phone. And when I'm picking up the phone, I'm actually going to walk around while I'm talking to you. And that not decreases our ability to pay attention. It increases our ability to attune to it. And so that movement and that disconnection from some of that stimulation actually helps us rather than hurts us.
Yeah.
And just building in breaks. We do need to get off, and your fourth Zoom meeting of the day, you're going to need to get off and do something else.
Yeah.
And for our kids, and I think that's important to remember as our kids are going back to school.
Yeah.
If our fully functioning, fully formed brains can't do this, let's really be empathetic to what this is like to the not fully formed brains.
Oh my God.
The breaks they're gonna need in order to be able to pay attention and attune to what they need to attune.
Oh, that's so true. That's so true. I mean, I'm trying to think of like a 7-year-old on a Zoom class and like what they're gonna do. So
yeah, it's not gonna be pretty. Let's be real. Yeah.
You're so right though, because today I just turned like the video off on the Zoom, on our Zoom editorial meeting, and I kind of just roamed around. I made breakfast. And it made it so much more bearable. But I was listening the whole time.
Yeah, exactly. It's one of those things that we have as a weird social rule that we have to look at each other the entire time. And it's good because it gives us that feedback. Someone's attuning. Sure. But it is very true that we don't need to do that. When I'm seeing kids in my office, we intentionally have things out that they can fiddle with and play with. And it never fails that the parent walks in the room and will say, put that down and pay attention to what Jody's saying.
Yeah.
They're tuning more by doing that. And again, fiddle toys, as we call them, are good too. Like I have, adult clients who are sitting there, off the Zoom call with their fiddle toy in their hand.
Yeah.
And it really does. That stimulation actually helps us attune better.
Sure. That makes complete sense.